the defeat of the Sauvages of Armouchiquois. However, spelling, punctuation, and accents have not been modernized by the Sagamos member 2 and his allies, the savage tribes, in New France, during the month of July last year, 1607. La défaite des Sauvages Armouchiquois par le Sagamos member 2 et ses alliés sauvages en la Nouvelle-France, au mois de juillet dernier, 1607 Lescarbet. Mark produced by Renaud Levesque, note of the transcriber. To facilitate reading, the letters UV, B, IJ have been restored to their modern values. Our world, immortamation, Bajuang, Kachrajorin, where one can recognize the war strategies of said savages, their funeral rites, the names of several of them, and the method of treating their wounded. In Paris, at Jeremy Perrier's, keeping his shop on the small degrees of the great hall of the palace, with permission. Illustration. Front. Accuses us before God. To the reader, dear reader, having been urged and requested by several distinguished persons to make known to the French the particulars of the latest voyage, undertaken by Monsieur de Poutrincourt in New France, I have sent you this sample as the sea currents permitted me to sketch it. Illustration. Decoration. If it pleases you, arrange for me to provide other details regarding this voyage and the beauties of that province, on which God has abundantly poured his blessings this year, inviting the French to cultivate it, and thus leading so many people who are still without order or religion into the fold of Jesus Christ, whose loss our slowness in acting. Illustration. Frontispiece. Preface. 4 years ago, Monsieur de Mol, General Lieutenant for the King in New France, went to the said province to recognize the coasts and peoples that reside there, and find a suitable location for French habitation. He pacified 2 or 3 nations that had been at war with each other for a long time, namely the Armouchiquois, Sauriquois, and their allies, the Atecamans, by declaring that anyone who started a war or gave cause for it would be his enemy. After spending approximately 15 months there, instilling fear in these peoples, he was forced to return to France, leaving Monsieur de Pontgravé as his lieutenant behind. But as the bad servant ceases to do evil as soon as he sees his master, for fear of punishment, and if he turns away from him, he returns to his nature. He said French, but above all is subtle, the stratagem used by Member 2 to surprise and deceive the Armouchiquoians when he arrived at the port of Choacoet. This is described in this martial story, besides which one can recognize the way they used to cry and bury their dead, wage war, heal wounds, and triumph among these savages, even the names of those, some of whom may be curious. Thus did the Armouchiquoians act, who, thinking that the French had entirely withdrawn from the province, since they had left the dwelling place of Sainte Croix to come to Port Royal, on the first occasion killed a Sauriquois savage who was a close-to-mate friend of the French named Penoniac, who would trade with them various goods he had received from they. Although he showed neither his numbers nor spoke to the whole people, but in simplicity with only a few, the Armouchiquois intended to capture him. But Member 2 used a ruse, well aware of their tricks, and they presented themselves unarmed, having left their bows, quivers, clubs, and shields at a distance from the camp. For under the pretense of making gifts as he had done before, and trading with them since they were unacquainted with money, he exchanged some furs he had taken from the French. After making peace, he appeared without weapons, along with his men. However, he had sent half of his people to lie in wait around midnight, who were stationed as lookouts awaiting the signal given to them, to make a sudden dash and attack the Armouchiquois the moment they heard the sound of a trumpet that he was to his blow done. Among the main goods he had brought were weapons, of which it was easy for him to make use as soon as he had unfurled them. Thus, taking a drum from several that were among these goods, and wanting to show their use, by the same means he called his people, who, on hearing them come, feigned a betrayal by the Armouchiquois, and suddenly he and his people seized the weapons he had drawn and engaged in combat. The Armouchiquois, surrounded from all sides after suffering great losses, retreated to the place where they had left their weapons. There the fight was intense. Fortune varied, and Member 2 was in danger of being defeated, having been pushed back as far as the shore. However, when the mother of Penoniac died, for whom all this was done, she presented herself in the manner of ancient Persians, offering her heart and gut, just as the father of the deceased, who was unable to move his limbs, had been carried there. This recognized how harsh this people is towards vengeance, and how truly noble their hearts are, not tolerating an injury going unpunished. Member 2 desired greatly to be assisted by a number of Frenchmen in this war, and he begged Sieur de Poutrincourt several times, but there was no way to satisfy his desire, as we were pressed to return to the route to France. Nevertheless, they made diligent efforts. Illustration, Décour, for they returned on August 9th, 2 days before the departure of Sieur de Poutrincourt, who came to him in a canoe as the 9th along the coast, to find the ship waiting for us at the port of Canseau, 150 leagues from Port Royal, where 150 leagues from Port Royal. We wintered. Illustration, frontispiece. I will, Sigor, Godmut, Louis, Day, The Defeat of the Savages by Sagamos Member 2, and his allied savages in New France last July, 1607. Hell! For the fox never changed his nature, and the double-dealing man knew not how to keep faith. Between these peoples there is an ancient discord, which rarely allows one to agree with another, and even if they sometimes treat each other with some peace, this peace can be called a trick. I sing Member 2, and the happy victory that recently acquired for him immortal glory, when he laid low the Armouchiquois fields, with dead bodies for the vengeance of the Sauric people's cause. It was Pannoniac, for that was his name. Sisi could not stay long. I know by effect, dependent on him who gives me cause, to say who has my Member 2 and his followers, and to pursue their bloody deaths, a savage among his people, once of great renown. This one, thinking he had made a good alliance with these savages, went without suspicion among them conversing. Even he helped them often with the finest goods he possessed. But for this, the wicked people did not abandon their bad ways. The companions of the dead save themselves by swimming they hide for a time in the shadow of a rock, daring not approach these mornings to the hot fire. Car, to speak truly, the murderous cohort was against them, and too great and too strong. For this Pannoniac, not 10 months ago, visited them for the last time, carrying in his ships various goods to accommodate these perverse nations, who have always been greedy for plunder. Without any mercy they assault their neighbors. Plunder what they any mercy they assault their neighbors. Plunder what they bait. Have and divide it. Nor in the hollow of a stone, but embalmed in the form of kings, as the pious Egypt used to embalm them. The people of Echamen received the bad news first, from which resulted in a mourning so filled with pain that the high firmament heard their cries. When she heard of the death of her loved ones, the neighborhood, in great cries, was in turmoil. But as if from Phoebe's horses weary, they retired under the waters, utterly worn out. These enraged ones finally abandoned the field, leaving there the slain bodies struck by the mass, which, at the dark night's favor, was suddenly snatched away by its friends without a sound, and laid, not like us, in the earth as a deposit, not in a wooden coal. But this was not the main cause, for when this poor body arrived at Port Royal, amongst his own people, God knew how many laments, cries, screams, and funeral complaints were heard. Only 8 days had passed thus, out of respect for Francis, who laughed at this. Heaven itself trembled, and the neighboring lands seemed to endure all these miseries through their echoes. The dense forests, and even the river itself, testified to an extreme sorrow. The services rendered to the wandering shadow, who had already crossed the wave from Lake Stygius. Will he go unpunished for such a vile insult? And to this body present, the Prince of Sauraquois begins to cry out in a terrible voice. What then, Member 2? He said in his language. What then, Member 2? Will you have no justice for the excesses committed against your kin, and even your home? I will never let this race be extinguished, who chases my ruin, and that of mine. No, no, we must not suffer such an insult. We have near us the support of the French, whom these dogs have done the same harm to. Children, it is at this moment that it suits us to die, or by our own hands send 10,000 souls of this accursed stock to eternal flames. It is resolved. The countryside must soon be bathed in the blood of these murderers. To Etaudon, my dear son, and your deep-rooted brother who have never abandoned your father, you must now arm yourselves with strength and courage, and so that they arm themselves quickly, and come find me by this river, where they know my banner is planted. Sus go quickly one way along the shore from here to Cape Breton, others through the woods to the Canadians, and Gaspé people, and the Echamens. Announce this insult. Tell our friends that I conjure them all to bear it deeply in their hearts. Member 2 did not wait for his people to be summoned, but each took their own path as they had been instructed, and in a short time showed such diligence that it seemed to outpace the postillon from France. Old came to Member 2, all filled with vain hopes under the assured guidance of the brave captain. When everything had arrived, from this bitter death it was necessary to begin mourning once again, and place the deceased body in the coffin. Tains chakudun, oadjumant, memembere, kichku, mesamoet, uzagat, anadabiju, medigoet, oagimet, and with them too, he who more than all abhors the Armouchiquois, that is Panoniades, who has an opportunity to bring misfortune to this nation for Phasian, the bitter memory of his brother's death. The bearded Member 2 begins to speak. Know this, dear people, he says, the reason you have come here is the body you see, murdered without mercy, whose shed blood demands vengeance from you. I will not urge you with long speeches. Therefore, all of you, moved by this strange spectacle, should desire to preserve praise. And as in olden times, when Caesar showed the Roman people his inhumane massacre, so now, filled with burning anger, he sought to avenge this cruel scandal against the assassins, as I have learned from ancient writings. Our ancestors have entrusted us with this deposit, by which they rest now in peace, not having deemed themselves worthy to live without avenging the insults against their enemies. When these words were spoken, each one entered the fierce battle with a burning desire for vengeance in their hearts, and would have gladly confronted that scoundrel if there had been a chance in combat. But first they had to bury the body and complete the final duties. As for the assistants, each did their part according to their ability. Some gave casters, knives, roses, weapons, matachias, and many other things. This large group of pain-filled people brought the dead body to its mausoleum, making offerings to Vulcan of its possessions, massive weapons, bows, arrows, quivers, torches, knives, and dogs' matachias as well, and all his belongings which he had, saved when he lost his life. Then they sealed the tomb, and left the body to rest whom they would soon claim as their spouse in a loss. When the Armouchiquois saw them on the shores, this defiant people recognized them all. The sky, which often portends ill fortune, had previously shown a somber omen of the effects of this war here, for having long held back its rage, it had frequently displayed lit torches, lances, dragons, and blazing armies. Thus set sail the fleet, with intent to conquer or die in this instance, leaving their children and wives under our protection, who have given a faithful account. Suddenly messengers fly across the countryside to warn everyone to be on guard and watchful before the enemy comes to disturb them. Peoples from all sides gather in great numbers until they outnumber the waves of the sea. But still Member 2 is not afraid, for he knows the means to take them well in hand. The enemy, proud in seeing his small number, promised to take him as soon as the dark night had spread its curtain over the land. However, Member 2 approached his vessel from the port of Chuacoit, where the opposing troop waited for him on foot, to know what affair led them. But he had left his men behind a rock, and advanced himself, to recognize both the port and the land, that he wanted to ruin through the effort of war. Yo, it was answered. This was the cry by which he called all that attentive people who were waiting there firmly. Then after he asked if he could safely and his small band treat with them, and amicably resolve the difference that had so long disturbed, and reduced both to ruin, while the appetite for vengeance gnaws at them, and eats their hearts, there, no longer running after one another. Member 2 accepts the offer, and as an exchange, sends one of his own to the shore, then retreats and goes back to see his people, who are eager to know what kind of will these peoples have, and if they seem inclined towards some peace. They seek to capture he who is more cunning than they, says he freely approaches the shore, and his people whom he left by the rock, that they have no greater desire than to see a solid peace forever established between them, so that those who know the Franks well share with them the abundance of their goods, and thus be able to help each all. The smiling prince watches his supporters embark with a joyful face. He regards them, saying, "They are ours. The plot is successfully laid. Tomorrow we shall see this defeated band, and tell them in full what has transpired. When we have left, the council was to present to them the goods that we have brought. Moreover, he says, let us consider surprising them, and in this deed here let us not deceive ourselves, and trade our merchandise with them, so that the false man may be caught in his own deceit. Remember us. It was still night, and the clear sky was all brilliant with golden nails, when member two, whose spirit never rests, beyond our disputes, there is booty. They have blood, nuts, grapes, and flax. All these goods are ours if we have courage, and if we want to have their women in the pillage, we will also have them. We will therefore go by sea only half of it. The rest in 2 secret parts will stealthily move along the forest as a good lookout, until, when my horn calls at the right time, then they will come to load, and we shall assist them, and until the day lasts they will strike without mercy, favor, or pity, so that here for a long time people may err. Thus, member A, ready for pursuit, is made the general of an elite troop. Metagoet, on the other hand, bold for great exploits, chose from the whole camp the strongest. Upon his arrival, some of his people descended to meet him with diligence. He greeted the leaders of this company, among them Olmechin, Marchin, and their clan. But the great Sagamos, to unfurl his banner, waited until dawn had spread its light across his entire horizon. And when the sun had risen to its place again, he set sail with the wind, steering straight for the spot where already this vast population awaited him. Then he presented the gifts I mentioned earlier, which were received with great joy: robes, hats, shoes, and shirts. But when it came time to see other goods, among the sharp iron, daggers, and knives, there were trumpets whose use was unknown, and the purpose of the evil they seemed to serve. While others in the woods waited carefully for the call that had been given, member two, desirous to display his prowess, convoked this people and then blew a trumpet, and in a deceitful manner he deceived the deceivers. They inflicted great slaughter. Yet from the woods arrived more, shouting loudly, "He! He!" For at once, without arms, upon hearing his own people approach, he feigned alarm, and finding himself equipped with clubs, daggers, bow and arrows, knives, spears and pikes, he seized upon his men, and each of them immediately began to struggle, without much resistance. Uchegoia, and amidst the confusion this mixed troop was instantly seen. They were mostly armed with knives worn at the neck. They were accustomed to carrying, but these weapons served them little in that hour. The Armouchiquois, realizing that it was indeed done, if he did not quickly remedy his situation, he thought of defending himself rather than surrendering to those present here. For member two, equipped with a more secure armor, a hardwood shield, and a good knife, as well as the sharp edge of a scythe, brought down the honor of the brave warriors. His sword likewise reaped the enemy with extreme rigor. The others, carried away by such fury, following in the footsteps of their leader, lacked not courage, but shouting and raising horrifying voices. They not had recourse to the good that sometimes turns around, as each one armed himself with a bow, arrows, and quiver, with spears, shields, and wooden clubs. This people has always been given to pillaging, seeking to gain such an advantage over member two, that for this hour they needed no weapons. Nevertheless, in every case they had taken care to make a storehouse at the bottom of a valley, where the fleeing troops finally went. Then, turning their faces, with fury they charged upon member two and his drunken people, sowing the blood of the Armouchiquois. At this new assault the Panonaiges were in danger of death. One was struck by a javelin near his chest. Shkudun, the valiant one, received a blow on his back that brought him down and put him in peril as the enemy gained ground. But strong Chukodamek, his brother, with his club split the press, making way to rescue him. Yet he was struck by a blow from Olmechin that took all his strength. Amnesinu, whose fame is known everywhere in this armor as the bravest one, tries with his dart to pierce member two from one end to the other. But the blow, missing its target because of the subtle strategy of Prince Surquois, he addresses his son Aktandanek, whom he loves more than all the beauty of earth and sky. And like a mighty oak felled by storm, it drags down its finest neighborhood below. So Mnesinu, dead, went to Pluto's dark abode, leaving many of his kin nearby. With a single strike, he pierced the sleeve of his garment. As lightning swift it struck him in the hip. Terrified, Prince Member Two sought the eyes of the monstrous Gao, the ancient duel that his tender father had once daringly undertaken. Redoubling his strength, he extended his arm and split it in two with his proud blade. The Armouchiquois did not cease to pursue, preferring to die honorably rather than live in shame, in the unlikely event that Member Two emerged victorious. They would leave their enemy with eternal disgrace. Thus they reassembled, forming diverse scars that gave their enemies many difficulties, for they had not yet been properly aligned. The opportunity was poorly seized, and they avenged themselves badly. The Savages Armouchiquois have the first points, who come to attack with their proud bands the leader of the Sauvages. A heavy blow in one and the other army falls from all sides. The clarity of the sun remains obscured, and the number of arrows always multiplies. Hearts but their arms. At this charge, some are wounded among the Sauvages, but more are knocked down on the other side, for of these the arrows with bone tips do not make such deadly breaches as those who are closer to the French who have steel points at the ends of their bows, however. Here is new strength once again that forces the Armouchiquois, not their go, 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 their battle cry. A bijou Olmechin, the strong Arbostambro, and proud Bertichin are the leaders who on the first charge met the troops of valiant Messamoet. Messamoet, who once breathed the air of France, had recognized the art of war among the domestics of the Lord of Grandmont, after many trials had conquered a mountain from which he thought he would have an easy advantage to safely harm the enemy. But this cunning one refused, and the large squadron of the squirrels led pursuing vigorously until they reached the shore where Neptune, angered, gives his waves respite. Their Negizadech, mother of the deceased, after long watching the battle, seeing the troops of Membertou in disarray, she gets down from her ship and emerges to give heart to the soldiers who had abandoned their first post. Others cry differently to their children. Enter, through the door of your home where you were born, or turn back quickly against the enemy. Finding themselves filled with shame from such a sight, a blushing blood rose to their foreheads at that moment, so they turned their faces away, and put an end to Median Empire's final days. And like Persians, mothers and women, seeing their sons and infamous husbands flee from the Median who would follow them, suddenly took brave steps to confront, without shame showing their bodies part where man receives life's entrance. Some exclaimed, "What then do you want to save yourselves here to avoid strikes from those who pursue?" Thus did this mother act upon seeing danger that Membertou and his people were about to plunge into. Cue his friends. Standing amidst them, he gives them courage and conjures each of them to avenge his insult. Negiruit's husband is a paralyzed oar, but whoever well understood combat practice, if it were made to be born there, and well recognizing the impending disaster that would press upon them unless some new strength arrived for them, he descends to the earth, and himself strives to march to battle so as to die there if he could at least resist. "My friends," he says, "you do not fight for the act alone, alas!" Which points too much at me. It's a matter of honor, it's a matter of life. So have courage. I see it trembling already. This is a good omen here. If these two are lost, the loss is followed by sighs and regrets from women and children, whom our enemies will triumph over just as they would over us. And with blows from these clubs, 10 lie on the ground. At these words, Membertou has the muskets fired which the French had kept ready for him. Chacoudoun does the same, for he too has 2 muskets, just like Francois loves them, which were prepared for necessity as a last remedy for the weakened body. The rest, frightened by the sound of this thunder, run away. Abenu, Chitagat, Olmechin, and Marchin, 4 of the worst among this mutinous people, fall at this charge. Membertou's eldest son too is aided by Kitchku, breaking through the ranks. With one blow he throws 3 to the ground, and everything around them is turned upside down. Chacoudoun, who remembers the blow he received, does not want glory to remain with the giver, but deals a death stroke, daringly attacking Arbostambro the strong, and presses the rest with such rigidity that at the mere sound of his name the enemy flees. Of 500 steps away, there was Ozagat and Anadabijou, barred from combat, were rescued by the brave troops of Pannonia Gaze, who were soon followed by Oejimek and his men. Fields, for whatever remained, though powerful in number, could not cause much trouble for the unfortunate fleeing horde that pursued them, especially since Oadjumant, with Memembere at the foot of the mountain that I had said to navigate, the fugitives, awaited, and valiantly pursuing, they beat them. But Oadjumant, having moved away from his camp too quickly, was seriously wounded by an arrow shot. Memembere as well in the same manner, the enemy pursuing him, had his leg twisted, which caused many to escape with their hands. Yet they could not deceive their enemy. Car they sought the man who of 6 women could quell the loving flames. But what is here worthy of astonishment is that not even a mouse died. The Armouchiquois was extinguished. This defeated army, member 2, glorious, sounded the retreat, and they combined Metaguet, Chichkobek, Bichuani, Pinin, Actembroe, Semkudek, all brave champions, soldiers, and captains, to finish these inhumane races, while on the other side of the lute, we think. Still, one finds wounded Pekmeg, Upakur, Ababich, Pitagon, Chistmeg, Umanuet, Kobek, whose wounds we think. The cure is basic. Among them is a soothsayer, unknowingly that one calls out Moin. This forecaster of the patient's state pretends to some demon to make an embassy, and according to his response, in this as in everything, he judges if he will soon die or stand. With this, from the field he sucks the blood. He blows, and blowing, stirs up his entire side. Having done this, the booty collected, before departing the chiefs of the Armouchiquois, they remove the testes to make many joyful feasts on their return, as long as their stomachs give them voice, or some misfortune rests them. Now they are hoisting sails, and approaching the port where they must give their wives comfort, who as soon as they hear of their arrival have immediately sent out a shout they have come from far away, eager to know what each had done there. They're there. Duty. Seeking Neptune for a restless repose, I have fashioned these verses to the rhythm of his waves, and in marching order, with a mass in hand, with a sharp knife having all faces of varied colors, they expected well that each one would have their own armory, to make a cruel butchery of it. But without that, they need to do their tag of war, and they need to do their tag of war. After the meal, dancing followed, which lasted all day and into the night, and will always last. Mark Lescarbot from Vervins.